These are brushes. They're the fastest class in Splatoon 3, with their main gimmick being built around the fact that you can roll through enemy ink at nearly the same speed as swimming. Inkbrush at this point is so fast it matches lightweight swimming mode while rolling. But what happens when you take the archetype of the fastest class in the game and make a slow weapon out of it? This is Painbrush. It hasn't been regarded as a good weapon, and it's gotten some of the most impactful buffs in the game, such as a 25% ink consumption decrease, that's a fourth of your ink tank, and a 2-frame fire rate increase, as well as having 2 frames less end lag because of a tech related to it. A fire rate buff is arguably the most important buff in the game. It gives you better paint, kill times, DPS, and a whole lot more at the cost of ink efficiency, something that was already buffed. If you attach these buffs to pretty much any weapon in the game, you'd see it drastically shoot up on a tier list. But Painbrush is seeing practically no use. Some top level players basically call it a fake weapon. But why is that? Today, let's take a look at Painbrush, because this weapon has held my interest for quite a while, and I feel like talking about why. Let's start by talking about its speed. I describe this as the fastest slow weapon. The fast is obviously the roll speed. Octobrush's speed is still pretty fast, but it's a decent drop off from Inkbrush. However, Painbrush is actually slightly faster than Octobrush. Because of that, Painbrush's roll is still quite good at mobility and avoiding enemy attacks, and the devs even want you to play into that, because after flicking, it's much faster to go into a roll mode than it is to go into squid form, even with the end lag that I mentioned earlier being shaved off. This means that Painbrush is pretty good at transitioning from flicking to rolling, giving it a quick mobility option to escape things like bombs or enemy attacks. But that's about all the speed the weapon gets, because Painbrush's flicks are slow. Not only is it 1 every 13 frames, which is even slow after the buff it got, but Painbrush has a unique mechanic called a windup. The windup itself isn't unique, but what Painbrush has that's special about it is after the windup, you can continually attack without going through it again. This windup lasts a whopping 23 frames, and after that, you can attack every 13 frames. That is extremely slow. This means Painbrush's 2-shot kill, the one you have to be up close for, is barely faster than Dynamo's horizontal flick. And that's up close. Dynamo can do that quite far away. That brings me to what even are the trade-offs for this? Because there's a few obvious ones: range, paint, and damage. On paper, these are huge strengths for the weapon to utilize. In practice, the slow speed often hurts its ability to utilize these well enough. Let's talk about why, starting with range. It's probably pretty obvious why you can't take advantage of this weapon's range as easily, and that's because of its speed. On top of the windup, at max range, you're going to be a 3 to 4 shot kill, which has such an insanely slow kill time that pretty much anyone is going to be able to move out of the way even if you get the jump on them. This forces Painbrush to have to play closer to get a kill, where it does still at least kill in 2 flicks, but you can kind of see that the range of the Painbrush can't really be taken advantage of, which is especially egregious when you compare it to other options like Tri-Slosher, for instance. Tri-Slosher's 2-shot range is barely smaller than Painbrush's max range, which also has the factor of strafe speed. I gotta mention this here real quick, but the strafe speed is the overlooked part of Painbrush's slow speed. It is horridly slow. At 0.18 units per frame, you could double Painbrush's strafe speed and it would still be considerably slower than the 96 gal. Yeah. This means that while Painbrush is flicking, it's basically stuck in place completely, which in terms of mobility means compared to options like Tri, they might as well feel like they have more range because Tri can adjust where it's shooting from a lot more easily. Again, my claim isn't that Painbrush doesn't ever get value out of the extra range, but instead because of how slow it is, you're often going to be starting much closer to people than the weapon would be able to normally. Let's talk about its DPS after that. Out of all the strengths the weapon has, this one feels the most intact. Yes, there is a bit of a windup that can allow people to react to you, but since the frame buff, if you are able to get close enough to try and DPS an object, it still does pretty good damage, especially compared to the other brushes. And the extra range does help make sure you can hit things like Big Bubbler's weak point. For example, if you want to shred a crab, it'll probably have a chance to stop you before you can fully utilize the strength, compared to something like a Splatoon trying to shred it. It still has its uses though. Finally is the paint output. I would say that the paint output on Painbrush is pretty good, but a little bit limited to use in actual matches. In the training room, you can get a special unbelievably quickly, but in an actual game, there's a big problem, which is repositioning. If you're trying to hold a zone and you get shot at and have to reposition, you have to go through the windup all over again on top of moving away with the weapon. This creates a massive period of downtime where you're not actually painting, making it a lot easier to control space against the weapon. In addition to that, Painbrush still has ink efficiency as one of its major weaknesses, and so because of that, you're also going to run out of ink quite frequently. This means that at the end of the game, Painbrush's paint stats aren't really all that exceptional. Same for its special output. So it becomes really clear that Painbrush's speed issue is a really big problem for taking advantage of the traits that are supposed to be worth it because of that. And gameplay wise, I think this comes with another problem. Painbrush really doesn't feel that fluid. Being both a slow and a fast weapon makes it really awkward to juggle the two. On the one hand, I find that really interesting as a player. I think it's cool to have to work around such an extreme weakness, and that can really change how you play the game. Painbrush has some really difficult positioning because of how punished you are for those problems, and it's a big part of the weapon's identity. But at the same time, it is supposed to also be mobile in the right situations, and I think that it interrupts that factor a little bit too much to be useful, so it really needs something to play around it to help out with that. And I think the weapon kits were kind of trying to do that, but failed. Painbrush's vanilla kit is the biggest attempt on it that we've seen so far, with its curling bomb. This can obviously make up for the mobility, and I do think it has some use cases. Being able to use it as a mobility option can be quite useful, but I think the utility is still rather limited. After your curling bomb, you still gotta wait out the windup, and you can use it to start swimming away, but rolling is already a pretty good tool. This isn't to say it isn't useful. If anything, the vanilla Painbrush kit is currently the more common one of the two, and that says something about how useful curling bomb must be, because the Wavebreaker is certainly not holding a candle to the Missiles. That said, Wavebreaker doesn't really enhance the aggressive style at all. If anything, it seems to rein the weapon back a little bit. You do have a very situational up-close damage combo, but besides that, this leans more supportive. And the Painbrush Nouveau kit basically screams a supportive playstyle. Point Sensor and Missiles give it dual location utility that you can use to help get your team in, but Painbrush really struggles to take advantage of that, mainly because Missile's 10-second cooldown paired with the ink efficiency problems means you really aren't getting that many of them. And if you're playing it as a more supportive playstyle, getting an entry special is very important to that style. It's hard to say if Painbrush is even trying to be a support or an aggressive weapon. Like I said before, the vanilla kit is more common in competitive play, and it's typically with either Ninja Squid or Quick Respawn, which means the playstyle that's most practical is gearing more aggressive, but the weapon kits definitely lean more supportive. It's hard to tell what this weapon's identity is, and that creates a bit of a problem. This is why I think the buffs for it haven't really done too much, because this weapon isn't really properly geared for either role like a lot of other strong weapons are. The main weakness of the weapon, while inherently interesting, is so overbearing that it's hard to take advantage of the actual benefits the weapon gets. And so I think the solution has to change a bit more of what the weapon is played around compared to just stat buffs. So how would they fix this? In my opinion, there's one idea I heard that seems to fix all these problems while keeping the weapon's identity unique. And it's really simple. If you're rolling with the weapon, you don't have to deal with the windup when you start to flick. That's it. I think that one change makes this weapon competitively viable and a lot more interesting. Think about it. Painbrush has ink efficiency problems. The fact that you'll have to roll around to avoid the windup will enhance how important those ink efficiency problems are. It'll create more of an emphasis and gear dependency on managing that, which is important for the weapon. But Painbrush will still feel sluggish. Because of those ink efficiency problems, you're still gonna have to use your swim form a lot, and because of that, you'll have to deal with the windup. However, Painbrush now has an actual transition into its fast state, which is taking advantage of the rolling. You now can very much switch between modes, and that fixes almost everything. Need better DPS? Try to roll it. Need to reposition when painting? Use the roll. You can keep all the other weaknesses intact because now you have a unique and different way to play around those problems. One that enhances some of the weapon's downsides while giving players options to work around its main weakness. I think this change would only serve to make the main weapon more interesting, and it would still feel like a slow, ink-hungry weapon at the right times. But now players would finally have the tools to deal with it in a way completely unique to any other weapon. I think that a lot of people write off Paintbrush as just a very brain-dead brush because of the extra stats it gets, but in my opinion, the unique mechanics associated with it give it a lot more depth than most other options, and I think a change like this that incentivizes you to play around that more often would make it a really interesting weapon, especially for competitive play. Hopefully, we can see something like that in the future. But let me know what you think about Paintbrush in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.